I used to dream about this day, the dress, the vows, the music. A vineyard in Sonoma, the air soft with the scent of roses and wine, sunlight spilling through the vines like liquid gold. Everything was perfect. Or it should have been. I stood there, Emily Carter, 30 years old, architect, designer of my own future. The kind of woman who built her life brick by brick. My fiancé, Ryan, smiled at me from the altar, his eyes steady, grounding. For a moment, I believed in forever. My mom, Sandra, hovered near the front row, elegant as ever, pearls gleaming at her throat. She'd insisted on planning every detail, the venue, the menu, even the dress fittings. I'd let her, thinking maybe this time she just wanted to be part of my happiness. I was wrong. As I turned to toss my bouquet after the ceremony, she brushed past me, her perfume sharp and cold, her smile fixed like porcelain. "We sold the house your dad left you to pay for this," she whispered. Just like that? The words didn't register at first. They hung in the air like smoke, curling, choking. My hand froze mid-throw, the flowers slipping through my fingers. I turned to her, my heart pounding, my mind trying to catch up. "What did you say?" I asked, my voice barely a breath. Her smile didn't waver. "You'll thank me later," she said, before stepping away to greet guests, laughter spilling from her lips as if she hadn't just gutted me. I stood there, the photographer calling my name, the guests clapping, Ryan's hand brushing mine. But I couldn't feel any of it. The vineyard blurred, the music, the laughter, the light. All I heard was her voice echoing in my head. "We sold the house your dad left you. The house, my father's legacy, my childhood summers, gone." I smiled for the cameras, pretending everything was fine, but inside, something cracked open, raw and bleeding. I looked at Ryan, his face full of warmth and love, and wondered how long I could hide the storm raging behind my practiced smile. The lake house wasn't just wood and brick. It was the last piece of my father I had left. A modest one-story home tucked beside Lake Auburn, with weathered white shutters and a dock that creaked in rhythm with the waves. He built it himself, every beam, every board, his fingerprints still on the banister I used to slide down as a kid. That house was our sanctuary. After long work weeks, Dad would drive us there, his old truck rattling down the dirt road. He'd play country songs from the radio, his hand tapping the wheel, his laugh easy. Mom always complained about the dust, the bugs, the small-town quiet, but I loved it. The smell of pine trees after the rain, the sound of frogs at night. It was peace. When Dad got sick, we spent his last summer there. He'd sit on the porch swing, his face pale but smiling, telling me stories about how one day I'd design homes bigger than his. "You've got my eye for details, Em," he'd say, his voice thin but proud. When he passed, he left the lake house to me in his will. Just me. Not Mom. I was 23, barely out of grad school, holding that deed like it was his last hug. Mom hated that. She called it sentimental nonsense. But I kept it. Even when I moved to San Francisco, I paid the taxes, the upkeep. I visited every year, sanding the old deck, planting new flowers by the porch. It wasn't just a house. It was proof that my father believed in me when no one else did. I used to imagine raising kids there someday, teaching them to fish off the dock, showing them where Grandpa used to sit with his coffee at sunrise. Now, knowing Mom had sold it, my chest burned. I could still picture her fake smile, the way she said it like a favor. "We sold the house your dad left you to pay for this." I looked down at my wedding ring that night, the diamond catching the light, and wondered if it was worth the price of my father's memory. My mother, Sandra Carter has always been the kind of woman who could turn a compliment into a command. Growing up, she ran our house like it was a stage, and we were the cast, expected to smile, to perform, to make her look good. Even when I was little, I knew her approval came with strings. "Stand up straight, Emily," she'd say before every school event. "Don't slouch, it makes me look bad." It was always about her. After Dad died, that need for control hardened into something colder. The warmth that once flickered beneath her surface vanished. She became obsessed with appearances, hosting dinner parties we couldn't afford, buying designer dresses on credit, insisting that people needed to see we were doing just fine without him. The truth was, she couldn't stand losing the one person who made her look kind. Without Dad to balance her, she was pure calculation. When the will was read and Dad left the lake house to me, she smiled through gritted teeth, her fingers tightening around her wine glass. "He meant it for the family," she said later, her tone sweet but sharp. "You'll share it when the time comes." I was too young to understand that share meant give. Every time I visited the lake house, she'd sigh dramatically, saying things like, "You don't even use it. It's wasted sitting there." Or, "You know your father would want it to help all of us, not just you." She called it guilt. I called it theft disguised as love. Whenever I pushed back, she'd play her favorite card, sacrifice. "Everything I've done has been for you," she'd say, her eyes glistening just enough to make me feel like the villain. If I didn't comply, I was selfish, ungrateful, cold. Over time, I learned to nod, to smile, to let her think she was winning. But inside, I built walls she couldn't climb. I saved quietly, worked hard, made plans she'd never touch. Still, she found ways to tighten her grip, small reminders that she was watching. That control was her currency, and I'd never be free unless I stopped paying the price. I met Ryan Blake on a Tuesday morning that smelled like coffee and sawdust. I was overseeing a renovation project downtown, a boutique hotel redesign, and he was the lead structural engineer. He wore rolled-up sleeves and had a smile that reached his eyes, the kind that made you forget how heavy the day felt. We started as colleagues, trading blueprints and ideas, but our conversations drifted past work, movies, travel, music. He listened in a way my mother never did. No judgment, no manipulation, just quiet attention. For the first time in years, I felt safe enough to laugh. We'd grab lunch between meetings, then dinners after deadlines, until one night he said, "You don't have to be strong all the time, you know." That broke me a little. No one had ever said that to me before. Ryan didn't try to fix me, he just stayed. His calmness balanced my storm, his kindness filling the spaces my mother's criticism had hollowed out. When I told Mom about him, she smiled too wide. "An engineer," she said, her voice dipping into disdain. "Not exactly ambitious company for an architect, is it?" I told her he was brilliant, hardworking, grounded. She brushed it off. "Grounded is just another word for plain, darling. You could do better." I stopped talking about him after that, but Ryan noticed. He'd see me tense when my phone buzzed, when Mom's name flashed on the screen. "You don't owe her your peace," he said once. I wanted to believe that. Slowly, I started to imagine a future where I didn't have to walk on eggshells, where love wasn't conditional. Ryan showed me that control wasn't care, and stability didn't mean silence. With him, I could breathe again. But I should have known. People like my mother don't lose control quietly. She'd been pulling strings for years, and she wasn't done yet. Ryan proposed on a quiet Sunday evening by the lake house, the one place that still felt untouched by my mother's shadow. The sun was melting into the water, painting the sky in streaks of orange and pink. He'd planned it perfectly, simple but meaningful, just like him. We were sitting on the old wooden dock my dad built, our feet dangling above the rippling water. Ryan reached into his pocket, pulled out a small velvet box, and said, "Emily, I don't want to build anything in this world without you." My throat tightened. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't rehearsed. It was real. I said yes before he even opened the box. The ring was delicate, a single diamond on a thin gold band, elegant, understated. Exactly what I would have chosen. For a few moments, everything was still. The lake reflected the last light of day, and I could almost feel Dad there, smiling. But that peace didn't last long. The moment Mom found out, she turned the engagement into a production. "My daughter's finally getting married," she'd gush to anyone who'd listen, already spinning it into a social event. Within days, she was calling venues, florists, caterers, without asking. "Don't worry, sweetheart," she said, her voice syrupy sweet. "I'll handle everything. You're too busy to fuss over the details." I told her I wanted something small, maybe even back here at the lake. "Oh no," she said, horrified. "That's fine for backyard barbecues, not weddings. You need a venue that honors the family name." The family name. She said it like it was a brand, not a bond. Ryan and I exchanged weary glances, but decided to pick our battles. It was easier to let her feel in control, at least at first. She insisted on a vineyard wedding, designer invitations, imported flowers. Every choice was hers. Every bill, she said, would work itself out. I didn't question it. I was too wrapped up in the glow of being engaged, too eager to believe she just wanted to make it special. Maybe a part of me still wanted her approval. I should have known better. Behind her flawless smile and color-coded spreadsheets, Sandra Carter was already setting the stage for her biggest act of control yet. It started with something small, a trip to my lawyer's office to update paperwork before the wedding. Ryan and I wanted everything clean and simple. Joint accounts, insurance, and the house deed updated in case of name changes. It was supposed to be routine. But when my lawyer, Mr. Hanley, pulled up my file, his brow furrowed. "That's odd," he said, scrolling through his screen. "It looks like the lake house title was recently transferred." I blinked. "Transferred? To who?" He turned the monitor toward me. My stomach dropped. The new owner listed was Sandra Carter, my mother. I felt a wave of confusion, then disbelief. "That's impossible," I said. "It's mine. My father left it to me." Mr. Hanley frowned. "The paperwork shows your signature on the transfer." My heart started racing. My signature, but I'd never signed anything. He handed me a copy. The ink was perfect, the loops identical, but I hadn't touched that pen. My hands trembled as I stared at the document. "Could it be an old file?" I asked, my voice barely steady. He shook his head. "Filed 2 months ago." 2 months ago, right when Mom had thrown herself into the wedding planning. I left the office in a daze, clutching the folder like a wound. When I called her, she answered cheerfully. "Hi, darling. Did you find your dress?" "Mom," I said, trying to steady my voice. "Why is the lake house in your name?" There was a pause. Then, casual as a shrug, she said, "Oh, that. It's just paperwork, sweetheart. Nothing to worry about." "Paperwork?" I repeated. "You transferred my father's house into your name." She laughed lightly, that same patronizing tone she used when I was a kid. "Don't be dramatic, Emily. It's just for convenience. I'm handling so many of the wedding finances. It made sense." My throat tightened. "Without telling me?" "You're overreacting," she said, her voice cooling. "You'll thank me later." I hung up before she could finish. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. I told myself it had to be a misunderstanding. It had to be. But deep down, I felt the first crack in the foundation, something my mother had built, not me, something that was about to collapse. Ryan noticed before anyone else did. The way my laughter stopped coming so easily, how I'd stare at my phone too long after every call from my mother. He'd ask, "You okay?" And I'd smile, brushing it off. "Just wedding stuff," I'd say, forcing a lightness that didn't belong to me anymore. I didn't want drama, not now, not before the day that was supposed to be perfect. But my chest felt tighter with every passing week. The lake house deed kept haunting me like a shadow I couldn't shake. Every time I looked at Mom, I saw the signature she'd forged. My name twisted into something unrecognizable. I wanted to tell Ryan, to let him in, but how could I explain that my mother had stolen the one thing my father left me, all in the name of family? I kept it buried, telling myself I'd deal with it after the wedding. Chloe, my best friend since college, wasn't as easily fooled. She saw through the smiles, the polite nods, the way my eyes darted when Mom entered a room. "You've been off," she said one afternoon as we fitted bridesmaid dresses. "What's going on?" I hesitated, the words crawling up my throat but never making it out. "Just nerves," I said finally. She gave me a look, the kind that said she didn't believe me, but she wouldn't push. Chloe always knew when to step back. Ryan didn't. He kept trying, cooking dinners, leaving notes on my desk, promising me that after the wedding, everything would settle. I wanted to believe him, but Sandra was everywhere, hovering, controlling, her calm demeanor unsettling. She was too still, too certain, like someone who already knew the ending to a story I hadn't finished reading. "Trust me, Emily," she said one evening as we reviewed the seating chart she'd completely rewritten without asking. "This wedding will be perfect. You just focus on being a bride." Her voice was honeyed poison, and I swallowed it like I always had. But that night, lying beside Ryan, I couldn't sleep. My thoughts kept circling back to the deed, the forged signature, and the feeling that something was slipping out of my hands. And for the first time, I wondered if my mother hadn't just planned a wedding. She'd orchestrated a trap. I drove to the lake house the morning before the wedding, needing air, needing him. I told Ryan I wanted to visit Dad's place one more time before stepping into this new chapter. The drive was quiet, my hands gripping the wheel as the road wound through the familiar hills. I hadn't been there in months, but I could picture everything. The chipped white paint, the way sunlight scattered across the dock. It was supposed to be my refuge, my reminder of where I came from, but when I turned onto the gravel path, my stomach dropped. A moving truck sat in the driveway. Strangers were carrying boxes out the front door. My boxes, my father's old tools, the porch swing cushions, the framed photos I'd left in the living room. "Excuse me," I shouted, slamming the car door. A woman in a blazer turned around, clipboard in hand. "Can I help you?" she asked. "What's going on here?" I demanded. She blinked. "The sale closed 2 days ago. The new owners take possession this weekend." Her words hit like ice water. "Sale?" I repeated. "This house wasn't for sale." She frowned, flipping through her papers. "Sandra Carter handled the paperwork. She said you were moving and wanted a quick sale." My breath caught. "Sandra Carter is my mother," I said, my voice trembling. "This house was left to me." The woman's face softened. "I'm sorry, but everything's final." My legs felt weak. I stumbled back toward my car, my vision blurring. The world tilted, spinning between disbelief and rage. I called Mom on the drive home, my voice shaking so hard I could barely form words. She answered on the second ring, chipper as ever. "Emily, how's the house?" "You sold it," I said, the words breaking as they came out. Silence, then a sigh. "It was for the greater good," she said calmly. The wedding needed funding. You'll thank me after tomorrow. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. You had no right, I whispered. It was Dad's gift to me. Her tone turned dismissive. It was our family's legacy, Emily. You wouldn't even have it without me. I hung up before I screamed. The lake house was gone. My father's memory, sold for champagne and centerpieces. Tomorrow, I was supposed to marry the man I loved, but all I could feel was loss. My mother hadn't just stolen my house, she'd stolen my peace. The morning of the wedding felt like waking inside someone else's dream. Everything was flawless. The vineyard bathed in soft morning light, the rows of white chairs perfectly aligned, the scent of lavender drifting through the air. It should have been beautiful, and it was. But beneath the silken sunshine, I felt hollow. The lake house was gone. My father's laughter, the porch swing, the creak of the dock, all traded away for a party my mother could brag about. I hadn't told Ryan. He was so proud, so happy, and I couldn't bring myself to break that. His parents had flown in from Seattle, beaming at me like I was already part of their family. I couldn't taint this day with my mother's betrayal. So I smiled. I let the makeup artist powder over the exhaustion in my eyes. I let my hairdresser curl away the evidence of sleepless nights. When Ryan saw me walking down the aisle, his face lit up with the kind of love you can't fake, and for a moment it steadied me. Maybe I could make it through the day pretending everything was fine. Maybe, for one day, I could bury the truth. Sandra was the picture of elegance, sitting front row in her champagne-colored dress, her pearls gleaming under the sunlight. When our eyes met, her smile was sharp, polished, and poisonous. The ceremony unfolded like a dream. Vows exchanged, laughter, applause. But my pulse raced beneath every word. As the photographer gathered us for pictures, she moved closer, her hand brushing my arm. "You look radiant, darling," she said softly, her breath warm against my ear. Then she added, almost lovingly, "We sold the house your dad left you to pay for this." The words sliced clean through the moment. My lips froze mid-smile, my stomach twisting. The camera clicked. Flash, laughter, a chorus of cheers. But all I could hear was that sentence replaying in my head. "We sold the house your dad left you." I turned slightly, meeting her gaze, searching for remorse. There was none. Only satisfaction. Ryan slipped his arm around me, whispering, "You okay?" I nodded, forcing my lips to curve upward. The perfect bride for the perfect photo. But behind that smile, everything inside me shattered. The photographer would never know that the happiest picture of my life was taken the exact moment my mother took everything from me. The reception glittered with laughter, champagne, and music, but I was running on autopilot. Every toast, every dance, every polite conversation felt like a performance in a play I hadn't agreed to star in. My dress was heavy, my throat dry, my heart pounding. I kept catching glimpses of Mom, laughing with guests, raising her glass, basking in admiration. It made me sick. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I found her near the rose garden, alone, phone in hand, her face illuminated by the string lights overhead. "Mom," I said, my voice low but trembling with anger. She turned, startled, then smiled that same practiced smile. "Darling, shouldn't you be dancing? Everyone's asking for you." "Why did you do it?" I said. "Why did you sell the lake house?" Her expression didn't even flicker. "Emily, please," she sighed. "Not tonight." "You forged my signature," I said, stepping closer. "You took the one thing Dad left me." Her tone stayed infuriatingly calm. "It's your wedding. You should be grateful. Your father would have wanted this. He would have wanted to give you something grand." I stared at her, disbelief curdling into fury. You think Dad would have wanted you to steal from me? I didn't steal, she said, her chin lifting. I made a choice for the family. For you. That house was just sitting there, empty, collecting dust. This wedding, it's something people will remember. I almost laughed. People will remember you, you mean? Her eyes narrowed. You're being dramatic. You've always been ungrateful, Emily. I gave you the world. Education, opportunity, everything. And you still find ways to resent me. I felt tears sting my eyes, but they weren't from sadness. You didn't give me the world, I said, my voice breaking. You took everything good I had left of him. For a moment, something flashed in her eyes. Guilt, maybe, but it vanished as quickly as it came. You'll see it differently once you calm down, she said, turning to leave. You'll thank me someday. I watched her walk back toward the reception, her laughter rising above the music. In that moment, I understood something I'd been avoiding my whole life. My mother didn't see my inheritance as love. It was leverage, and she'd use it until there was nothing left of me to take. The morning after the wedding, the house was filled with flowers, gifts, and the faint smell of champagne, but all I could feel was numb. Ryan was still asleep, peaceful and unaware of the war raging inside me. I sat at the kitchen table in my nightgown, staring at my phone, my mother's words replaying like a broken record. We sold the house your dad left you to pay for this. I needed answers. I called Mr. Hanley, my lawyer, before the sun was fully up. His voice was groggy but firm when he said, "Meet me in my office in an hour." I drove there still wearing my wedding band, my hands shaking against the steering wheel. Hanley didn't waste time. He pulled out the file I'd seen weeks ago, the forged deed, the signature that looked like mine. I dug deeper, he said, sliding over a stack of papers. Your mother used a power of attorney you signed years ago. My heart dropped. What power of attorney? He flipped the page, pointing to my own handwriting at the bottom of an old document. It was dated 6 years ago, when I was in grad school. Mom had convinced me to sign it, just in case of emergencies. A medical form, she said. I hadn't thought twice about it. She used this to authorize the sale, Hanley continued, his tone tight. She had it notarized again with a false witness and sold the property to a private buyer for full market value, $385,000. My breath caught. Where's the money? He leaned back, his eyes sympathetic but weary. Gone. The sale proceeds went straight to vendor accounts tied to your wedding, plus several personal credit card payments under Sandra Carter's name. My pulse roared in my ears. Vendors. Debts. She hadn't just taken my inheritance. She'd cashed it out to cover her own failures and dress it up as generosity. Hanley lowered his voice. This is fraud, Emily. You can press charges. I stared at the papers, my hands trembling, the weight of it all pressing down on me. Dad's house, his trust, my mother's lies, all gone in the name of control. I want to see every receipt, I said finally, my voice steadier than I felt. Every dollar she spent. Hanley nodded. I'll get them. As I left his office, the morning light felt harsh, too bright, cutting through the fog in my mind. Betrayal had turned into something sharper, resolve. My mother had crossed a line she couldn't uncross, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to let her win. That night, I told Ryan everything, every ugly detail, the forged signature, the fake power of attorney, the money trail. I expected him to be shocked, maybe speechless. Instead, his jaw clenched, his eyes blazing. She stole from you, he said, his voice low but fierce. From your father. We're not letting her get away with this. I nodded, tears welling despite myself. "She'll deny it," I said quietly. "She always does." He reached for my hand, squeezing it tight. "Then we'll make her face the truth." For the first time in days, I felt steady, anchored by his calm certainty. Together, we met with Mr. Hanley again, who laid out our options: a civil lawsuit, possibly criminal charges for fraud. The moment we filed the preliminary report, the fallout began. Mom must have sensed the storm coming, because within hours she was calling everyone in the family, spinning her version of events. "Emily's overreacting," she told my Aunt Denise, who called to check in. "She's just stressed from the wedding. I helped her, and now she's punishing me." By evening, I was getting texts from cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. "Your mom says you're suing her? Over a house? She sacrificed everything for you, Em." The narrative was shifting fast. Sandra had always been good at that, turning guilt into gospel. But this time, it didn't stick, because cracks started to appear. Aunt Denise called back the next day, her voice lower, uncertain. "Emily," she said, "your mother's done things like this before. She borrowed money from Grandpa years ago, said it was for medical bills, but he found out she'd used it to pay off her credit cards." My chest tightened. "Why didn't anyone say anything?" "Because she made him promise not to tell you. She said she didn't want to ruin your relationship." More calls followed. Stories of favors, loans, and emotional manipulation stretching back decades. Mom had left a trail of quiet victims, too polite or too scared to speak up. Ryan listened as I pieced together her pattern, her need to control, to take, to rewrite the story in her favor. "She's been doing this her whole life," I said, staring at the wall. "And everyone just let her." He shook his head. "Not anymore." That night, as I drafted the official statement for Hanley's office, I realized something important. This wasn't just about money or property. It was about reclaiming every part of myself my mother had tried to own. She'd taught me to stay silent, to keep peace, to smile while bleeding, but the time for silence was over. The next morning, I met Monica Reed, the attorney Mr. Hanley recommended. She was sharp, composed, and direct, the kind of woman who didn't flinch in the face of lies. Her office walls were lined with case files and degrees, the air carrying the quiet hum of confidence. "I've reviewed your situation," she said, sliding a folder across the desk. "You've got a strong case. The forged power of attorney, the financial transfers, it's textbook fraud." Her tone was calm, but her eyes burned with purpose. "We'll go after the sale first. If we prove forgery, the property can be restored to you, and we'll pursue restitution for damages." Hearing those words, "restored to you," brought a lump to my throat. For the first time since the wedding, I felt hope. Monica assembled a team of investigators who moved with quiet precision. They uncovered records linking my mother's credit card payments and personal loans to the same accounts that received the house proceeds. Thousands spent on designer clothes, luxury dinners, and family event invoices that all pointed to my wedding. There were fake vendor receipts, double payments, and even a luxury spa charge the day after the sale cleared. Monica called it what it was: a pattern of deceit. When I confronted Mom over text, her response was short. "You're making a mistake, Emily. You'll regret this. No apology, no denial, just control disguised as warning." Monica pressed on, filing motions to freeze assets and subpoena bank records. When the notice finally reached my mother's mailbox, she called me, sobbing. "How could you do this to your own mother?" she cried. "I did this for you. For your future." Her voice cracked perfectly, rehearsed like a scene she'd played 100 times. But Monica had prepared me for this. "Don't engage," she'd warned. "She'll use guilt as her weapon." And she was right. I didn't answer. I let the silence speak for me. In the following weeks, her facade began to crumble. Vendors she hadn't paid started demanding refunds. Her friends stopped returning calls. Family members who'd once defended her now whispered about her debts and deceit. The woman who prided herself on perfection was unraveling thread by thread. When the fraud report hit the county court, it became public record. Sandra Carter, former charity board member, hostess, mother, was now a defendant in a case for financial misappropriation and forged legal documents. The woman who'd built her life on reputation was watching it collapse, and for once, I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. The courtroom was cold, sterile, and echoing with the kind of silence that holds its breath. My mother sat at the defendant's table, her once polished exterior dimmed by fatigue. Her pearls were gone, replaced by trembling hands and tear-streaked cheeks. When she saw me across the aisle, she tried to smile, but it faltered, fragile, desperate. Monica stood beside me, steady and unyielding, her presence grounding me like stone. The judge entered, the sound of the gavel slicing through the air. What followed was hours of evidence, documents, and testimony. Monica presented each forged signature, each transfer receipt, with precision. "The defendant," she said, her voice even, "exploited a position of trust and used fraudulent means to appropriate her daughter's inheritance." My mother's attorney tried to spin it, claimed it was a misunderstanding, that she believed she had consent. But when Monica displayed the notarized forms with my fake signature and the timeline matching her personal debt payments, even the opposing counsel fell silent. I watched as the truth dismantled her image piece by piece. Then it was her turn to speak. My mother stood, clutching a tissue, her voice trembling. "I did it for love," she said, eyes glistening as she looked toward me. "I wanted her to have the wedding she deserved. I wanted to give her everything her father couldn't." Her words hung in the air like poison disguised as perfume. The judge didn't flinch. "Love," he said evenly, "does not excuse fraud." His gavel struck once. Final. The ruling came swift. Restitution for the stolen funds, the property transfer voided, the lake house legally restored to my name. My mother's assets were frozen to repay damages. She'd lose her home within the month. Her reputation, her most prized possession, was gone. She sat motionless as the ruling was read, tears streaming silently. For a moment, I almost pitied her. Almost. Months later, I returned to the lake house. The new buyers had rescinded their claim, and the property stood empty, untouched since the sale. The air smelled of dust and pine. The floors creaked like they remembered me. I walked through each room slowly, fingertips tracing the familiar grooves in the wood my father once carved. On the porch, I sat on the old swing, the lake shimmering under the afternoon light. For the first time, I cried, not from grief, but from release. I'd taken back more than a house. I'd reclaimed my father's legacy, my voice, and the part of myself my mother had spent years trying to own. The wind carried softly through the trees, and I swear I heard him there, proud, peaceful, telling me I'd finally come home. A year later, the lake house looked different. Warmer, brighter, alive again. The once faded shutters gleamed with fresh white paint, and the dock, rebuilt plank by plank, stretched proudly over the calm blue water. Ryan and I spent months restoring it ourselves, our weekends filled with sawdust, laughter, and quiet moments that stitched us back together. It wasn't about erasing the past, it was about rebuilding from it. The house wasn't a monument to pain anymore. It was a promise to never let someone else write my story again. Ryan hung wind chimes on the porch, their soft notes dancing in the breeze, while I planted flowers by the front steps, marigolds, my father's favorite. The place finally felt like home again, not because it was perfect, but because it was ours. In the backyard, near the edge of the lake, we planted a small oak tree in Dad's memory. The soil was cool and damp under my fingers as I pressed it into the earth. I whispered, "For you." As Ryan wrapped his arm around me, the wind rustled through the leaves as if answering back. For years, I'd carried the ache of what my mother did, how she twisted love into control, generosity into guilt. But standing there, with the sun setting over the lake, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was done carrying her weight. She'd lost her house, her social circle, her spotless reputation, but what she lost most was me. The daughter who finally learned to stop seeking approval and start setting boundaries. Sometimes, the hardest boundaries are the ones you draw with family. Love shouldn't cost you everything you've worked for. It shouldn't demand your silence, your savings, or your sense of self. Real love builds. It doesn't break. As the seasons turned, the oak tree grew stronger, its roots digging deep, its leaves shimmering gold in the autumn light. Every time I visited, I felt a quiet peace I hadn't known since childhood. The kind that told me I'd finally come full circle. If you've ever had to let go of someone to protect your peace, I want you to know you're not alone. You can rebuild. You can heal. You can start again, no matter who tried to take that from you. Tell me in the comments, would you forgive someone who sold your legacy for their comfort? I'd love to hear your story. This story was intense, but this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.